I'll
Yeah, see, at least I would tell you when we were recording.
I was about to tell you, but then
I think you're already hitting the button.
I hit the button like right as I started talking about that.
So I'm gonna do it because I did all of it.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, welcome to our retrospective on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now that we're done, finished last week, and we kind of wanted to take some time to really talk about like what happened the same way we did after we finished the beginning of the game. Yeah, it's me, Piro, here with Posterghost.
Yeah, unfortunately, Slam Zone Nick did not make it through the entire playthrough, so it's just going to be me and Zach talking about it. And honestly, I didn't go through the whole playthrough. Zach really did take on the brunt of it because he decided to do the almost 100%, right? You did basically everything.
There's many games that I did not finish. Like, there were some where I knew I was just going to come back to it later and it wasn't going to be interesting to watch on video, so I was like, I'll just deal with this later.
So, I mean...
So realistically, there's probably another 20, 30 hours of bullshit that I'm probably going to have to deal with before...
And I think
like we didn't finish the end game content either.
I think that's like the grand sentiment of it too, where it was like by the time we had gotten to this point, to the end, we were just like, okay, we need the end. We need the answers. We need to know what's going on. Like it was for me, it was exhausting. It was a trudge, and I wasn't even playing the game.
So for me, I think part of the reason you feel that way is because you're not engaged when you're doing the combat. So like I'm getting like the dopamine from the combat part of it and not from the mini games.
Right.
So like I was fine with the game going longer. Like, to be honest, it wrapped up a lot quicker than I expected. Mm-hmm. Like when we got to the City of the Ancients, and there's end game content after that, right? When you get to the Forgotten Capital or whatever the fuck it's called. Like I was like, oh, we just got here, and then we had like 2 or 3 hours of content and it was over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. Did you feel like, speaking of the end game content and, what you worked so hard to get to, do you feel like the resolution was worth what you did?
I mean, I think if you're just playing it regular and you're just playing for the story, I think how you feel about the game is very different.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is something that I sort of described to other people when I was talking about this game, that Rebirth and Remake feel very different. They are very different games. Rebirth is so much more open and less hallway the way Remake was. And part of that freedom makes the game feel so huge. Like, I bet even if I didn't do all the mini games, I bet the game's 80 hours.
Right. But I guess...
And so...
Oh, go ahead.
Like, I feel like I have the value of it, and I went into it knowing that we were going to get another game. Like, I didn't expect like real resolution. Like, I expected some kind of cliffhanger.
Well, you still I feel like the whole thing that drove it was looking for answers. Like, if it was very self-referential to the other game, where it was like a lot of the content that wasn't new was like you going, oh, how are they going to redo this? Or how are they going to pay homage to this part of the game, right? Or how are they going to make this different or slightly the same? Or, I mean, yeah, exactly. And you kind of end up with this, like, I don't know, I feel like it's a tug and pull between what you want to experience out of a new Final Fantasy VII and what you don't want them to change about the old Final Fantasy VII. And it's like, I'm not saying that in the sense like, oh, they shouldn't change it. Like, this is a new part of the story. They should be advancing the story or giving reason to doing this. And I think the whole, like, redoing Final Fantasy VII, but having it not be a one-to-one remake, having it be alternate storyline, it's ambitious, right? but at the same time, I feel like if they're going to do it, they need to go full ham. And I wanted that at first until we got to the end and I started seeing what was happening, and I felt like we were like 2 scenes away from like going to the Kingdom Hearts doors and unlocking Kingdom Hearts doors.
So here's the thing. Like, when we start talking about the ending in general, like, I'm not 100% on board with it just being like a multiverse thing. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm more thinking that most of the people that have died exist in this other place.
It's like the live stream is almost like a waiting room where it's like they return to there and they get to exist in the live stream separately.
Yeah, and then they can come back. Like, I think it makes more sense than... Because, I mean, it's been like a week and a half, people. Like, I don't know 100% remember. But, like, it makes more sense than it being like, every choice has a different blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Right? Like having it be that splintery, like, doesn't make sense to me.
I just have a problem with that in contemporary writing too. Like, and I know that's my bias, but like, I feel like the multiverse excuse, and it stemmed from like a very like, I don't want to say it's like an anime trope, but it's like the person coming back to life or like getting a second chance after having. And I think this comes from a meta standpoint. You have to take yourself out of the world and think of as a person writing this storyline. Like, right, they resolve this storyline where this character has this, you know, either lesson they learn or something dies or, you know, this irreversible consequence. And then all of a sudden you get to this part and they're like, well, in the multiverse, there was no irreversible consequence. And you're like, come on, guy. Like what was the point of the irreversible? Point of the consequence? I don't know. I'm not a fan of the multiverse writing.
I mean, there's not really a place for it to go.
Right.
Like, in terms of, okay, so she's still alive, right? And you're sitting there looking at what happened in the original game versus what happened in this one, mm-hmm. right? And there's no place for it to logically go. What are we going to say? Hojo's a wizard? Like what? Like, I don't see another way for them to control the narrative except it being that.
Well, they're obviously having Sephiroth and Aerith be the two opposing, like they're the diametric forces, right? Or diatonic forces. What's the word I'm looking for? Like they oppose like black and white, right? So I think that's what they're trying to do with the Gi and the ancients and everything like that, where there's like this whole underlining mystical spirituality magic that materia and the live stream is all founded on. And I'm all great. I'm fine with that. Like, that being expounded upon is something that I overlooked it as a younger version, like, of myself playing the game. Like, it was stuff that you'd have to read files or like get really into the Lucretia storylines and stuff to really uncover. But at the same time, I think what made Final Fantasy VII so good in itself was its being self-contained, like not really needing to be a part of another Final Fantasy's lore. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think that part of the, like, it's the same thing. Like, if you're here and listening to this video, listening to us talk about this, like, we talked about the Kingdom Hearts thing a ton because of how many different things they're folding into all of the stories at once. Mm-hmm. And for it to all come together, like, you're trying to take all of the stress, all of the, you know, all of your emotions into that and spiraling it all together. And the only thing I think you can do is to go this way. Like, even if, because I like seeing the other characters and I like seeing what's happening. I honestly wish there was more content on the other side.
Like, when you say the other characters, you're talking about the second, like, Midgar where Zack and Biggs and everyone are, right?
Yeah. Because, like, you know, that storyline doesn't really make sense either if you pay attention to the beginning of the game. Because at the beginning of the game, everybody's dead. Right.
And they exist within the same world, but it's as if there were different consequences. That's what confused me about it, is that's what set forth, like, the multiverse idea in our head, I feel like, is because we saw Zack watching Aerith and Tifa and all of them like fly away in the Shinra things, and then like, you know, Red 13 helps them escape and he jumps out of the thing with Cloud, and then, you know, Aerith is down there, and you're thinking Zack is experiencing a whole separate reality, right? But it's just Zack fighting fate metaphorically within this world. Is that what it really is?
I don't think that is what it is.
Yeah, I think it's a separate world. Yeah, I do too.
Like, it's because the way they kind of talked about the end of the game was that it gets to this certain point where nothing, like, it goes to a certain choice. And I'm guessing the choice has something to do with, it has to be something about Aerith dying. Like, it just has to be that.
Right.
It's the only thing that makes sense. Like, that's what they would hinge it on. But everybody else in the game, other than those two, is asleep or dead, right? Mm-hmm. So is this the afterlife? Is this the live stream? They exist, but they're not awake, right? Is everybody that we've seen in that other world dead too?
Right.
Like in the live stream? And it's like, okay, but then why is there that huge rift in the sky? What does the huge rift in the sky mean? Right? And when I was talking to somebody at work about it, I was like, well, maybe this is like, you know, everybody gets one shot, right? And everybody who's come back from death that's how they see the sky. And that's how she's seen it the whole time, because she said things about like, don't look up at the sky. Don't ask questions about it, right?
Well, Cloud can see it now too, right? Cloud can see it, right?
So I'm thinking that has to do with like, is it, you get this after you have like a near-death experience, but you know, given fucking everybody's had a near-death experience in the goddamn party. Like, so
well,
what is it about them?
I think it's less that, and it's more having large concentrations of Mako, because Tifa got it when she was in the Mako, in the Mako lake inside of the Mako whale, right? And then Aerith gets it because she's an ancient, because she's basically Mako blood, right? And then Cloud gets it because he's soldier. Zack gets it because he's soldier. And then Sephiroth gets it because he's soldier, because they're all technically DNA clones of Genova, which is an ancient, right? And so is Aerith, for that matter, right? No, Aerith is a Cetra. She's a descendant of the Cetra.
Yeah, she's an actual.
So she's, So that's the difference. Is like, see, I don't know. That's where it's murky. Is because I think, didn't they mention something too about a hero's soul, quote unquote, will always get like a chance to break fate or something like that, or go against, because that's the whole like ghosts, their fate, and the white fate is Aerith trying to push fate in one way, or you know,
one side is the planet, the other side is fate,
right? And so
the white ones represent the planet,
and so the planet. So Sephiroth is trying to move against fate then, and what he's trying to do is well, what we know now is he's trying to bring about nothingness, which is the Gi, and because they want out of the karmic loop, which is funny because that's almost the same exact thing that I think was the storyline of Final Fantasy 4, or is it 6? It was 4 or 6, those two. At the end, they wanted to make nothingness, and then out of nothingness, they create something because they have the will to live, right? And then
but at the same time, Sephiroth wants, his motivations are still kind of the same, where he wants to like travel around the universe like he's fucking Unicron using Genova to control the planet and travel around the universe.
That's true. So maybe Sephiroth is an individuality that exists beyond just so he's using the Cetra as a weapon, or not the Cetra, the Gi as a weapon to weaponize their darkness against the planet, and the planet is rejecting that because they know that evil would destroy the universe as they know it. And so the planet is then using people like Cloud, Zack, and Aerith as instruments to fight that fate.
See, it's really strange because Sephiroth gets like all of this assistance from fate, and we don't really get any assistance from the planet until like the end.
Right.
Like, I mean, I guess you can say, well, you guys got the summons and that's part of the planet. And like, I mean, we had to find all that shit. Mm-hmm. Like, we're literally fighting against this hurricane of like, you know, that Sephiroth is trying to, you know, make a small change on fate, which kind of makes me wonder, like, what is Sephiroth's status, especially if he's supposed to be dead? And he's able to be reborn out of any of those guys in the black robes, right? The same way that in Advent Children, Kadaj turned into Sephiroth, right?
Right.
So I'm kind of wondering, like, what is the purpose? Like, is it so Sephiroth only exists in the live stream and he needs like the black materia actually taken into his body, which means that Cloud is still playing right into his hands.
Well, also one thing that don't know if I mentioned, but the Sephiroth that you fought at the end of this game was the Sephiroth boss at the end of Final Fantasy VII. You essentially did the end fight of Final Fantasy VII on the second game of the remake. So I think they're definitely alluding that they're going to be like, oh, something else is going to happen. But you know what? That makes me question, which is kind of funny.
But you've also fought Genova at the end.
Yeah, but you're fighting Genova right now. Like, that's what I'm saying. You did a split fight at the end of Final Fantasy VII where half the party fought Genova, and then the other half fought Sephiroth, right? And then you kind of did the same thing here where you fought Life Chamber, and then you fought Sephiroth. But my point I was going to make, though, is just like, so we have this like possibility of either changing the timeline, altering what's going to happen, or like multiversal. We don't know what's going on, right? Because we also have the continuity of Advent Children and then beyond that Dirge of Cerberus to account for. Like, what is that? You know, what is that?
Well, I don't think that the Dirge of Cerberus storyline, aside from the stuff that took place before Final Fantasy VII, even fits in this universe the way. If it's a divergent point, like, because technically it's not the same universe then, but the character backstory exists, right? Like, they all converge at this one spot, and then it's like they're telling a new story from here, right?
I guess so. To the viewers, we are going to start a Dirge of Cerberus playthrough so we can clear this up specifically. But, I mean, what we do know about Dirge of Cerberus is that, it takes place, what did you say, 2 years after Advent Children or between?
No, Advent Children takes place 2 years after the original game, and then Dirge of Cerberus takes place 1 year after that.
1 year after Advent Children.
Yeah, okay. So like the party is separated in Advent Children, right? But they're back together
at the end of the second one. At the end of Advent Children.
In Dirge, I mean.
Yes, exactly.
So Yuffie and Vincent are back together, right?
Right, exactly. And then it moves further into the Wutai thing, where it's Wutai versus Shinra, right? Because that's when they start involving all of the crazy technology stuff and like... I don't know. That's where it starts getting wacky, and I'm like, I'm not going to claim to know how any of that stuff works. They bring back, what's his name? Genesis and that stuff. So that's the Wutai storyline. They got into a little bit of that, which in retrograde, which makes me to believe that they're going to actually involve that into the main game too, because now they have the weird scruffy-headed guy that Shinra is talking to, the guy from Shinra, Rufus, right? Because what's that all about? There's another agent that's moving behind the scenes of all of that, too.
Oh, no, Rufus killed him at the end. Don't you remember he shot him?
No, remember? He didn't shoot him. He like, came back to life, and he was like, you could never kill me.
Because when he was turning into Sephiroth.
I guess so. He turned into Sephiroth?
Yeah.
And I don't know.
That's when he started shooting him.
Oh. But he didn't die? Oh, that means he's being represented. The scruffy-haired guy is being represented through the robed guys. So the scruffy-haired guy is another personality that can be reborn through the soldier genes.
I'm scrobbing through the thing.
You're like, wait a minute. I don't know if that's actually what happened. Well, I mean,
his name's Glenn.
Glenn. It's the worst name. See, this is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Like, I mean, let's take.
Why does he need like a ridiculous name?
Well, it's not that he needs a ridiculous name. It's that, like, why are we putting more agents into this storyline? We're just injecting more into this, where it was like it existed fine before, and you've already injected so much otherwise, like, into all of the other ancillary stuff. Like, rather than giving us more, why not explain what already is, you know?
Hang on, he's about to... Well, they did that with a ton of the areas, right? Like, most of the things that actually happen in this game would have just been you walking to another cave or
That's
to a patch of forest, right?
That is true. They did fill in. I'll give them credit to that. They filled in a lot of stuff in between.
So I think the thing that feels frustrating is that they try to make each biome kind of feel alive. Mm-hmm. And they like add mini games, whatever context they want to use to make that one area feel like it's a living, breathing thing. But it's like it's too much, right? Like we want to, like we're just moving through this area, not making a dramatic change for it.
I think they could have done it more tactfully. Like it was definitely like hyper, like everything was hyper fixated on, and everything had so much depth that you didn't just like, you weren't going through the areas. You were like, all right, well, I got to do this area now. And like, as opposed to there were times like when you got to the gold saucer, you were like, oh, there's a lot to do here, right? What you expect. But then like in this game, you were like, I'm not even going to do all of these gold saucer mini games. There's way too many to like try to get all of the high scores on this shit. And like, yeah, it was like that in the other game too. But I feel like having the advantage of just going into a city, right? And like, this is where everything happens, right? As opposed to having this whole biome with characters and everything like that, it serves the purpose of like not slowing down the game and bogging down the game. I have no problem with a game not being open world. And I believe sometimes that an open world is unnecessary to a game. It's just something that's expected from a game now.
So Glenn is secret advisor to President Rufus. He is from the First Soldier mobile game.
Great. We will never play that game.
So, no, you were right. Like I watched the video. Glenn is talking to him, and then he turns into Sephiroth, and then he shoots him in the back. And then he comes back, and then when he disappears, he looks like, generic red shirt guy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's probably something that if we had played that game, I admit, our fandom isn't strong enough to have played the First Soldier. But, I mean, that may have been something that would have answered something for us. But
well, I think that's the problem. It's the Kingdom Hearts problem that we had before.
Yeah.
Where, like, we needed to have played every single game, which we did. To understand what was happening in Kingdom Hearts 3 and understand every character, everything that was happening. And I think a lot of the frustration is that, and what is Kingdom Hearts came out, 2002?
The original Kingdom Hearts? Oh, I couldn't tell you. Yeah, it's been a while.
But Final Fantasy 7 is 96, 97, 98?
Yeah, 97. Yeah.
So it's like 5 years later, but there's like so many more games for the Kingdom Hearts stuff.
Yeah, and it's like a whole nother like system and like, well, okay, if we're gonna make the comparison to Kingdom Hearts, right? I think we have to compare the satisfaction we had with both endings to the series, because this is the Kingdom Hearts 3, right? It almost feels like close to the same engine where you're doing a lot of the square button mashing, you're doing the attacks with the other person. It's not as easy, I think, as the Kingdom Hearts.
It's not even close.
Yeah, it's not as easy as the Kingdom Hearts, right? But like, it has that feel to it. I feel like it's impossible not to compare it to Kingdom Hearts. But when we finished the Kingdom Hearts game, we were both speechless. Like, I remember that feeling. We were like, oh my God, that was such a labor of love. Like, I didn't feel like it did get.
But that's the last game.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing, though, is like, even with...
This is not the last game. This is Kingdom Hearts 2, and this is them alluding to the next game.
Well, I think if you're going to compare it to Kingdom Hearts 2, that's an even harder, thing to compare it to, because Kingdom Hearts 2 was so good. Like, and Kingdom Hearts 2 was good because of its mechanics. Like, let's be honest, Kingdom Hearts 2 made the advance from Kingdom Hearts 1 to whereas... the mechanics were so much better. Like, using the drive system and all of that was really fun.
That's like the transition from remake to rebirth.
Okay, but my question then is, from the transition from remake to rebirth, do you like everything they added? Do you feel like... Because I feel like Kingdom Hearts 3, and this is going to sound ridiculous, or the Kingdom Hearts series, by comparison to this, doesn't feel as bloated. And I know that's ridiculous because of how crazy the Kingdom Hearts series is. But I feel like... I
think that Kingdom Hearts feels way worse.
Really?
Yeah, because there's only really the main party, Zack, and then I guess the First Soldier guy, right? And I guess Genesis and what's his name? And Geo, right? Whereas Kingdom Hearts literally has 9 different main characters in addition to the ancillary characters.
Yeah, but when you're playing the game, you're able.
It's a baby game though.
Yeah,
it's not complicated.
No, but
and
you just said it's 9 characters, and then you said it's not complicated. So is it complicated?
No,
or is
I
it
mean
not
the storyline.
They're complicated.
But there's all of Organization 13. There's the nobody versions. There's like 50 characters.
Right, and my point being is, with all of that quote unquote bloat, I still feel like the storyline was able to be focused and not as meandering as the Final Fantasy VII story felt like this time. I felt like we spent more time floating with dolphins and like marching in parades than we did actually learning about Final Fantasy VII stuff. And it's like,
I'm gonna call you on something right now. You bitched the entire beginning of Kingdom Hearts 3. The whole time. Yes, until we got to the very end. You just bitched about everything that they're not giving you any story. Exactly the same thing.
All right, but then here's my defense of that. When you're doing that in Kingdom Hearts, you're going through Disney worlds, right? And that's the whole point. You're going through Disney worlds. Here, it's like, now we're just going through biomes. And I guess, sure, that's the thing. They're creating this world. But it's, I don't know, I didn't like the way that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was paced in comparison to Kingdom Hearts 3. I don't look upon it, or I don't feel as fondly as I do about it as I do about Kingdom Hearts 3. And maybe that's because... I
think it's some recency bias for you.
I think
the last one came out such a long time ago.
I don't think it's just recency bias, though, because I feel as though I like what Kingdom Hearts... And I was just about to make the point, like, I think it's maybe because all of the Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and 3 games are mainline games, and they're not trying to edit an originally, like, created story. And maybe so it doesn't have anything to live up to as far as... like reminiscing aside from itself, right? And it's the same thing with this, but I feel like it doing what it didn't really add to it's not adding to the Final Fantasy VII story. I don't feel like I'm getting more out of it. I feel like I'm just getting dragged along, and it's like
I mean, it's a different story. It's not the Final Fantasy VII story.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't know if I like it. I don't know if I just like this multiverse different story. Like, it's weird, and it's like it feels like they had an idea, and then it wasn't. It feels like they made it an audible, right? Like halfway through the development of this game. They didn't originally plan for this game to be this crazy multiverse changing story, but they had all of this stuff kind of hodgepodged, and then they were like, we got to figure a way to get this together, And that's what I feel like the difference is between the two storylines. And I bet, and I could be talking on my ass, and I don't doubt that, because I'm sure Kingdom Hearts definitely had some ass-pulley, hodgepodgey shit that they had to patchwork together too. But I don't know.
And to be fair, when we got to 3, we played all the other ones in a row.
Yeah, that does help. Yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking, so here's the thing. For me, I'm along for the ride. The game, parts of the game is frustrating, but I'm interested in what's happening. But it's probably because I'm not trying to throw shade on you, but I'm not as much of a Kingdom Hearts, a Final Fantasy VII stan as you are.
Right.
So I don't feel the need to defend the story. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, well, what are they going to do with this? I'm just asking questions.
Right.
I beat Final Fantasy VII over 15 years ago at this point, and that was 10 years after it came out. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm just I'm interested in how they're expanding on the world. I just don't like that their thing is to make it a bunch of mini games to do it instead.
As long as it wasn't be mini games. Well, I don't know.
I would have been fine with the story stuff, but some of the missions, because you don't watch every single fucking mission. There are so many missions that you did not see, mm-hmm. where it is just the mission is probably too long. And my thing is that if I'm going to get a story mission in this game, if it has a cutscene in it, if it has actual animated cutscenes, I'm good for maybe 45 minutes. But if it's super basic in-engine stuff, I'm like half hour max, and there are several of them that are like an hour, and it doesn't really add anything except to like add more items and let you get to know about the area a little bit, which is I don't think every area needs to be like that, because you already kind of brought up the pacing thing, which is like the way I was playing the game, which is probably not, well, actually it's probably how a lot of people are actually playing the game.
Yeah.
Where I'm doing every single thing in the area and then moving on into the story part. And so like when you get the story part, there feels like this sense of urgency, and then you move on to the next area and there's no sense of urgency.
Yeah,
because of that.
Exactly.
Because there's not actual story intermixed into that. Mm-hmm. So I think that instead of it being like 40 points or whatever, like, or 30 or whatever it ended up being to get all the pips for the area, I think it should have been broken up more and tossed more story in there, because even when I was doing it, I'm like, okay, so we're playing like this soccer game and I have to do this.
Well, I feel like Intergrade and the first one kind of had better pacing because of that. They didn't have to suffer that open world pacing and like, here's a bajillion things. It was like, here's your chapter select, get through the thing, don't miss any of the boxes, and you're good. But it wasn't like, okay, satisfy Chadley for 17 hours. You know what I'm saying? Like...
Yeah, and you know what? I feel like me having like the summons and stuff didn't really add a ton to the game, except for it being cinematic.
Yeah.
Like when I summoned them and we got to do like the actual thing. Like for me, it feels like a different game because the combat is so different. Mm-hmm. And you know, I replayed it like a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
And by comparison, Remake's combat is super clunky and slow. And my favorite character to play in Remake was Tifa, because she's fast and her combat's cool.
Right.
And then they did that for everybody except for Aerith in the next one. And like, you so rarely got to do limit breaks in the last one. It happened so rarely. They like never got to do it.
Right.
And then the summons would only happen in really, really long boss fights. And the way it is now, like you can do it in like regular fights. So like, I think that's what I see as the iterative difference for me. And like, that's why I was enjoying the game, except there were times where it was like blisteringly difficult.
Right. I don't know. I see for me, it's like, it's hard for me not to see it as like, they put all of this work into these games, right? And they're like, they kept telling us, we're going to remake Final Fantasy VII. We're going to remake it. But, how many years passed? 15, almost 20 before we got to even here? And at some point there had to be a guy in a business suit who came down and was like, look, guys, we need a fucking business plan. You need to figure out how you're going to recoup all of this labor and all of this stuff, production time that we have no product to show for. And they're like, well, we're going to release it like this. And then they worked on the engine as they kind of like released it. And that's what it feels like, right? Like Intergrade got a little easier to play, and then this one's a little easier to play.
Intergrade probably has the best combat.
Really? Because you're only playing Yuffie and it's not the same.
Yuffie doesn't play exactly the same.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. You can tell us in the comments, but I feel like maybe it was just because the combat was slightly easier because you were only controlling 2 characters. Mm-hmm. That she felt like way more overpowered.
Right.
But I mean, it could also be that the game sort of incentivizes you to play Cloud the entire time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it should. That's the way it was in like the original. And like, I think that's what they did by making everyone a little bit faster or a little bit more even in combat. It was like, if you want to play someone else, you can. But at the same time, it's like, Cloud's going to do everything you need. So why not play the main character, right?
Mm-hmm. So I think for you, based off of what I'm hearing, and you can tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
That like it's a remake, but it's not what you wanted.
It's that's the thing, is like it's hard to say that too, because when you say It's not what you wanted. It's like, well, then what did you want? And if you asked me that question, I'd be like, I don't know. I don't know what I wanted, but that wasn't it, you know? It's like,
No, but if it was similar to the original, I don't think it would have been a worthwhile game to play.
yeah, that's the thing too. Is it's like I think I would have rather had like continuing stories. Like I think that's what made it so special to see Cloud in Kingdom Hearts, is because you were like, you got to see him as like a whole nother person, and you were like, wow, like what happened in between here and Kingdom Hearts. And I kind of want the same thing. Like I would rather play a God of War-esque game with Cloud as the main character, and you get to, you know, kind of link up with Vincent and all of them, right? But then Cloud gets to do all the cool stuff from Advent Children. I'd be happy with that. And I get to continue the storyline, and then we expound upon it in the future as opposed to retconning the past. I don't like retcon. I'll admit that. That's what irks me the most, is not having a solid answer on what they're doing.
And that's what happens when it's the second game.
Yeah,
it's like the second Star Wars movie.
I mean, and here's the thing too, right? Is I think one of the overarching themes of the Rebirth game, right, is appreciating what you have when you have it, right? And like, nostalgia isn't going to last, and that's the whole thing with Aerith. This is right. It's like, as long as, no matter how hard you want to hold on, right, at the end you're not going to get to keep her, at least at the end of this game. And so you have this huge game with all of these tiny little things into it, right? And I think the overarching moral or the message of the game is to like savor it while it lasts, right? Because you could have
just like your time with Aerith.
Exactly. And so I think that's what they were trying to do. And so it's really hard to fault the game. Like, with all the negativity that I am saying, like, it's a beautiful game. The art direction is great. The music is absolutely amazing. It's honestly astounding how much work they put into everything. They must have had a team for every single one of those mini games, right?
Yeah, I know. We brought up multiple times that like the mini games feel so hard because they feel so overtuned, which means that people who were working on them worked on them for a long time.
It's
not that the mini games are bad, right? It's just a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many.
It's dense. It's so dense. No, that's my biggest complaint with the pacing too, and the open world is it's like every complaint can be put back to that is the density of the game. But if you look at it in that light where it's like, well, sure, you could blow through this in, what, 60, 70, 80 hours, right? If you really just hammered through this shit, right? But the point is, you're supposed to be savoring your time with Aerith and savoring your time with the party, because after this, what happens, right, is Cloud ends up alone. And he ends up
it's like 30 minigames.
30, well, yeah. Well, Cloud ends up alone, right? And so he ends up kind of like in this self-sabotaging, self-loathing, self-pitying kind of like thing where he has no one. And then at the end of Advent Children, he finally sees the light again. So I think what this is supposed to be is our last breath, our last chance to be in the little flower garden that is Aerith, or like the date, as you could see, because like she was like, come on, take me on one last date, right? And I think that's what it is. It's both the gamer, the player, right, and Aerith and Cloud experiencing this for themselves, right? Experiencing the bitterness, the bittersweet, like, you know, like knowing that this is the last time.
So I've like watched like a little bit of the stuff about like the different date endings, and the Aerith one is not really what you would expect. It's not like the Tifa one.
Right. Excuse me.
It's Cloud struggling with the guilt of Zack and like not knowing. And when they go there, he even says like, is this okay for this to be happening? And I'm like, oh, like that is such a different tone to the actual game.
Right.
So I think that there are so many questions I have about like what they're going to do. And I assume they're going to wrap everything up because they have to, like with this next game. But I think the only way to look at it now is to like, especially after this last one, is to not look at it as a remake anymore. Like you can't.
Right.
Like, you have to look at it as a standalone thing now.
Right.
And judge it for that. And the things that are frustrating about the game, I think would be frustrating if it was any game. Like, it has nothing to do with like the story, like that it's a Final Fantasy game. It's just that it's a fucking slog for some of the stuff. But for me, it's like, I got to the end and I was like, of course, this is what has to happen because we know there's going to be another game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, the big difference at the end is we don't have to experience Cloud losing Aerith and then going down kind of the way he was in Advent Children, right? We get to see him as if she was always there, whether it's his trauma or it's the live stream, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think being able to see how his character changes with that information, where Sephiroth and Aerith are not just fighting over the planet, they're fighting over him, right? Like, when he put the black materia into the sword at the end, it made us realize, oh, he still got his hooks in him, right?
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, because that's the whole other hook. Is his Cloud's tug from.
So they're not in the last game. They were fighting over the planet, and like, you know, you felt like you were trying to protect Aerith, so she was like a tool for you guys to beat Sephiroth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then you lose her, and then it's like, how do you regroup from here? But in this one, that stuff happens, but she's still there for him.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And how is that going to affect how his character grows, having the trauma of all the stuff with Sephiroth, but then whether she's real or not, having Aerith there, right? Because even when they were at the end, after she had died, you know, everybody's really upset. You know, before they get on the plane, Aerith's crying. I mean, not Aerith, Tifa's crying. And then it's like, well, Cloud doesn't seem that beat up, but nobody else knows, right? That he can still see her. So I'm wondering what they do with that, because now, like I said, it feels like the storyline is about not only the battle for Earth and like, or Midgard, whatever the fuck.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
What it's called. As Cloud being this representation of the planet, like being broken, you know, being corrupted by, you know, Soldier, which in essence is Shinra, right?
Which is in essence Shinra corrupting the planet. Yeah, it's all. And
then Sephiroth and Aerith trying to save him, right? Mm-hmm. And Sephiroth's trying to turn him into him.
Right. Well, it's also actually breaks down to nature versus nurture too, if you think about it. Like, it's his nature for him to be Sephiroth, to be Soldier, to become a Sephiroth clone, right? But the nature of the nurturing of the people around him are what turning him against that. So it's very much so the nurturing of the planet turning the nature of his darkness, his fate, against him. So yeah, that is a very good way to think of it.
Well, and if you look at it through that lens, through the course of the game, you see like that darkness pop up in him a little bit at a time, right? Like, and it was really bad in this, right? Like, the things that he did was so, like, it was so unexpected when that stuff started happening.
Right.
And now when you look at it, you're like, oh, that's the Sephiroth stuff. Like, whether it's, you know, Mako poisoning, whatever you want to call it. If it's him getting his, you know, his chains into him, right? And Aerith and the party doing everything they can to save him before he becomes like them, right? Like that he can still be redeemed, instead of it. Like, I think that basic part of the storyline makes the game feel very different. Mm-hmm. Like, as opposed to in the original, where you're just like, okay, well, we know Sephiroth's the bad guy, I have to kill Sephiroth, right? Whereas there's layers to it now where it's not just about stopping Sephiroth or, you know, making up for Aerith's sacrifice. It's about saving Cloud, because that's kind of how we feel, right? Like, you're being pulled in all these directions. There's so many influences happening, and you're just trying to hang on and try to, like, keep moving forward. And how is he going to cope with all of that stuff, right? Like, is Aerith going to be able to see, like, all the trauma things that happens in his head now? Like, what's going to happen then if she can see all of the stuff that Sephiroth is doing? Like, can you imagine if he has, like, one of those like this dissociative, like hallucinatory moments where, and then she comes to like try to save him or something. Right. Like, how much different would that make the game feel?
I don't know. I don't know if that would make it feel any different, because
No, I'm talking about the next one. I'm more talking about the next one.
Right. I know. And it's like, I don't know. That's my thing. Is this like Aerith being with him and Sephiroth being with him? It's like he has the inner conflict that lives with him always. But I don't know. I just don't know.
But now we have a physical manifestation of the other side.
Yeah, I know. I just don't know if we needed... I don't know if it needed that. Like, I think it's nice and it has depth and it has layers and stuff, but I don't... That's my thing. I don't know if we needed all of that. It was well and done before, and now we have this another layer where it's like, oh, well, she was with her the whole time. And now it's like, well, now we get to change how Cloud reacts to stuff, because instead of being alone, he has support. And so we're going to see if he can things or if it goes to the Advent children. That's the thing.
Because like he lives with that guilt, right? Like,
yeah, that's why he's...
you see it like all the time, but like he doesn't look like he has the guilt in this, right? Whereas like you could see everybody else taking it so hard.
Yeah, I don't know.
But then it's like he doesn't tell them because they don't want him to think he's crazy. He doesn't want them to know. Like, is this Sephiroth trying to hide things, right?
This is what bothers me about it. Is this is like, we can make all this speculation, but it doesn't even matter because they can do whatever they want now. Like, what's the point of speculating on something that absolutely has no consequence to the writers? Like, it doesn't matter, like, because they're just gonna do whatever they want. They can make Cloud sad at the end of this if they want to. Like,
that's because it's a new game. It's not the same game.
Right, but
they're gonna have liberty to do whatever they want anyway.
Well, then this is a multiverse story, right? Then this is a separate story from the original Final Fantasy VII. So do you think they're going to tie the original storyline into it, or do you think this is a new storyline?
To be honest,
do you think that they
I don't
just
know.
don't think...
I would prefer they didn't, but because I would rather just have this self-contained story.
Right. But then they're saying that this story trumps the original story. They're saying this is what we originally wanted to tell, which I don't believe that. And that's my problem with it. This is not the story they originally wanted to tell. This is them hodgepodging shit together because they developed a game for 20 years. It is not cohesive, I don't think. I think it's multiverse excuses. And that's my problem with it.
Who said that this was the story they originally wanted to tell?
I didn't. That's what I was saying. Is like, if this trumps the original story, I feel like then, if they're saying, no, this is the story that matters, right? Then, because it's not in the multiverse, right? There's not two separate Final Fantasy VII stories. There's this Final Fantasy VII story, right? Mm-hmm. Then this is the one they were trying to tell, I would assume.
I don't think it has to be... I don't think it has to be that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I don't like it. I don't enjoy that. I feel like it's bad writing, and I feel like it's exploitative of the IP. Like, and I get like it's, yeah, we get to sit back and enjoy being with them and the characters and everything like that, but I don't know if I need that anymore. I don't know if I need to experience it with them. Like,
I don't think the game is for you.
I don't think it is either, but like, that's like, I sat and I experienced it because the original game very much was for me, and it's something that but
you had nothing to compare it to then.
I hold it in high regard. And what do you mean I had nothing to compare it to? We compared it to Kingdom Hearts for like the whole first half.
No, I'm talking about the original. I'm talking about the original when you were playing it.
I would compare it to 9, 8, and all the other ones.
No, I'm saying when you played it after those ones came out?
No.
No, but that's what I'm saying. When you played it, it's like really foundational for you.
Right. And I never said that like it wasn't. I mean, this is my opinion. This is why I feel the way I feel. Like, and I don't like what they did to it. I feel like it's not a good way to write. And like you said, it's not for me. And it's weird that it's not for me when this is literally my favorite RPG, or was my favorite RPG at the time. And it's strange. It's just strange to me. Like, who is it for then? Because it's self-referential to a point where the only people who would like it who are familiar with the game originally, or at least the
Yeah,
IP.
but not everybody has to hold the opinion you have while playing the game.
No, I understand that, but like, we're not discussing whether or not my opinion is right or wrong.
No, but
right?
I'm saying, like, you asked who this game is for.
Right.
It can be for people who like the game, who like this.
Right. I guess. I don't know. It doesn't. It just it feels soulless to me. I don't feel like it has a lot of soul to it, whereas the original one had a lot of soul. And I know that's a very abstract way of describing it, but that's just the way it is.
I would kind of disagree, because the second one feels super empty and there's not as much story as even probably the first game.
You mean this one, right? The game that
I'm saying compared to like the
original Final Fantasy was empty.
How long is the original one?
You're comparing apples to oranges. You're like, that was a game made in 1997. That game was groundbreaking when it came out. It had so much content. It had 3 discs. Mm-hmm. So, like, what are you comparing?
I'm saying that, like, I think that the things that game had are the results of then.
And I feel like
I think if we're comparing the games, like,
then this one falls short, doesn't it? Because if it's the results of then,
it doesn't for me.
That's what I'm saying. It does for me. Like it, and like
if I'm being like, I haven't played it recently. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm gonna be 100% honest. Like, it is probably, I'm guessing it's like 2009. I think it was like around when like the PlayStation Network got hacked or whatever. Whenever that happened. Like, that's when I finished it. Mm-hmm. And I just remember, like, a lot of grinding and, like, you know, maybe it's because, like, the fact that I didn't play it when it first... I mean, I played it a little bit when it first came out, but I didn't, like, ever finish it when it came out. And, like, maybe it's because it's not that game for me. Like, it's not... like... The way you feel about the game is how I feel about Breath of the Wild. Mm-hmm. Where it is not the same thing because it's not what I wanted, right? And I understand that, right? Like, I can see that this game is not designed for me, and I didn't finish Tears of the Kingdom. Mm-hmm. Like, because it was just kind of more of the same, and like the gimmicks in it were not what I wanted. Mm-hmm. Right? And I mean, I don't resent the game. I'm not saying you do.
Right.
Like, it's just...
I mean, I didn't even play those games. I don't like those games for the same reason. They're too big. I want an insular story. If I'm going to play a game that's this big with a story and everything like that, I don't want to be distracted with all the bullshit. I don't want to repair weapons. I don't want to do any of that shit. I don't want game mechanics. I want narrative and story, which is what I think I purported when we were playing too. I would rather have this be an animated series than a game. Because I feel like it being a game bloats it. And it's like, instead of having to be like, okay, let's tell this story how we want to tell it, you say, okay, we have to appeal to a consumer base and we have to appease, you know, this and that. And I feel like that's an unfortunate effect of modern game design. And I know we're not really getting that meta into talking about this because we just were supposed to talk about Final Fantasy VII, and if we really wanted to talk about modern game design, that would be a bigger problem I have, because I think games now are incredibly bloated. And we see that. We see $70, $80 games, and then we see indie games for $20 that tell supremely better stories, you know? And
so...
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish. No, finish.
Now
I'm probably going to shift to something else.
Okay. No, go ahead and shift, because like that's about all I had. So yeah, go ahead.
So I Googled it, and like the original, let's see, Final Fantasy remake. So the original remake is about 32 to 35 hours. Okay. Mm-hmm. It took me, I think, according to the tracking on PSN, that it was like 117 for me to do all the content. But if you just mainline the storyline, it's just like 40.
Right.
So there's like 70 hours of things that we didn't have to do. And I mean, we were talking about it when we were playing it, that like it definitely affects how I see the game. Like the fact that I did it that way because I was only going to play the game once.
Right.
I knew that. And I was like, well, I want to experience everything the game has. And it definitely jaded how I saw a lot of the game.
Right.
And I think that if I had just mainlined it, which is probably would have been a better experience for you, I think maybe it would have affected things differently. Because then there's not these huge gaps in storyline, so you're getting to hit the beats maybe the way it was intended, as opposed to with all the side questy stuff.
I guess my argument to that then would be, though, but if I were playing the game, I would do the same thing you would do.
I feel like you would do it and then you would eventually get frustrated, where I was about like hour 60, where like you just, because that's when you started talking about like, I just want to see the story part.
Yeah.
Like when you were just like when I would finish an area, like I just want to see the story, right? Like, and I imagine that's what you would start doing.
It probably would have happened soon before or after Cosmo Canyon. Like the moment the Chocobo traversing got tedious, I would have been like, this is the stupidest shit.
That's Gungaga.
Gungaga,
like,
yeah.
Gungaga's before Cosmo Canyon. Gungaga would have been what had happened.
Yeah.
Because that was the first place that was like a nightmare to traverse.
Right.
And I don't care about Zack's Village. So I think that does affect it. Because I would be interested to see like what the perspective is from people who didn't do that.
It would be interesting,
Because I wonder if it would be different than like, because I know we have differing opinions about this.
Right.
Like what it would be, what that person felt the game was versus like, even like somebody who just played, I can't imagine playing the first one like straight into the second one. Like, it'd be so disruptive. Yeah. So like that's where I'm at. Like I'm understand like, and I'm 100% like trying to play devil's advocate with a lot of this stuff. Okay. Like I'm not purposely trying to rile Chris up if you guys are watching this. Like I'm just trying to take a different perspective to try to understand like what's happening. Right. And I think that every person is going to have a different perspective on what's happening. And like, is it going to feel like for those people who didn't play the other games, like, is it going to feel like how we did when the Glenn character popped up? You're like, who the fuck is that guy? And then I like Google it and I was like, oh.
Yeah, because you imagine
I'm not gonna play that.
Like we did have the luxury of just coming off of Crisis Core. Like I had just beaten Crisis Core, I think this year or the year before. So you had
all like the Angeal, you had all the Zack stuff, you had the Genesis stuff, right?
Yeah, and like I knew it picked up right from where it left off in Crisis Core. So it was like you're sitting there and you're like, okay, it's got to be like they're just filling in the blanks, right? They're just, and then it was so off. It was like, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, the first one, it was like they're filling in the blanks, and then when it got to the end, and she was still alive,
exactly.
You're like, oh, they're not filling in the blanks.
But that's when you were excited, right? And you're like, oh, finally, like, and I wanted to save her too. I will admit that. Like, if you're gonna make me work this hard and fucking like do it and then still take her away, it's pretty bittersweet. Like, it's hard to be excited and still not get what you want. But like,
well, what if like it changes his, like, not just in terms of the narrative, like what if he gets like different shit?
Yeah, I don't know. What if this is this path to the Kingdom Hearts one? That's what I was afraid. I was literally like, he's gonna open a key door. Like he's gonna get the fucking wing.
I was
like,
joking when we were talking about.
I know, but like, that's the way it felt, and I was like, I don't know if I was ready for that. And it's like, there's a name for this, and it's the Fortnitification of IPs, where it's everything becomes a multiverse and includes everything. It's happening to Magic the Gathering. People are mad about it happening in Magic the Gathering right now. Not to derail everything, go to Magic the Gathering.
No, you just turn back into Final Fantasy. You're like, oh, they're releasing a Final Fantasy 7 set next year.
Right, exactly. But like, my point is, I guess, like, I think, and it's kind of bittersweet for me because it feels like you're aging out of your childhood. It definitely. And it's like you try to hold on really hard to the nostalgic things in your life, right? And you don't want them to change at your core. But things change and you can't stop them from changing, right? And like you do want, in my hearts, I would love for another generation to pick up on Final Fantasy and understand why we love it so much. And like, it's not just Final Fantasy VII. That's why we love Final Fantasy. We love Final Fantasy VII well, I love Final Fantasy VII because of the fandom, right? I can't speak for both of us, but like, think about it. All of the flash animations of Final Fantasy VII, all of the fan art of Final Fantasy VII. When Advent Children came out, it was landmark. It was like, oh my God, they're making a Final Fantasy movie and it's 7. And it was so cool because it made Final Fantasy anime for the first time. And so it was like everything was coming together. Kingdom Hearts was coming out at the same time. And it was like, it was justifying. You know, you were like, yes. But now, speaking for me, getting older and not relating to these things is hard. It's like, well, maybe I am growing out of this stuff. Maybe fantasy and like things like this, like I don't want to see these tropes represented in high fantasy because it doesn't seem real to me anymore. I want to see these tropes represented in something that feels more real. And I'm not saying like, oh, good. I was going to say, I don't want to play Alan Wake.
Finish what you're saying.
I was going to say, I don't want to play Alan Wake every time, too. Like, I do love Gurren Lagann, right? But at the same time, I don't know. Maybe this isn't what does it for me anymore.
Oh, God, I lost track of what I was going to say. I think that... What were we talking about? We were talking about a different game about this before, about, like... the next generation experiencing it and you know them not understanding like the back that's what I was gonna talk about. It feels like that when we started watching Black Clover, right, that we had seen all these tropes and they've done all these things versus somebody who hadn't seen all this stuff, right? Like what would their experience be experiencing this stuff for the first time, right? Whereas like when we watched the first episode of Black Clover, you're like, oh, that's Naruto, oh, that's Sasuke, oh my God, why is he yelling? I don't want to watch this show, right? Like I already know these tropes, right? And I feel like that comes with like how much media we've consumed at this age.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Whereas like assume somebody's like how old were you when you played Final Fantasy VII?
Oh,
10?
Like 14 tops. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So imagine if somebody's experiencing all of this stuff for the first time, right? And instead of them being like frustrated about like, oh, who are these characters and stuff, they can buy EverQuest. And I'm not trying to make it like a fucking commercial thing, but like they have the ability to go back and experiencing these things after the fact, right? And to later help them understand, like this is like the gateway drug to the universe, right?
Yeah, I guess like, yeah.
And I get it that way, right? Like, on the one hand, yes, there's so much nostalgia and people being able to play this game and having experienced all this stuff before, right? Like, it's going to tug at your heartstrings for all the nostalgia. But at the same time, if you want to be able to, pass that baton on to the next generation, I don't think that this is necessarily the wrong way to do it either.
That's like, that was going to be my point. It's like, well, my question, do you think like someone just getting into the Final Fantasy VII IP would enjoy this as their flagship? Like if you were like, just play this one first. Like don't play the original, don't play Crisis Core. Like those are plagued with, like, I wouldn't want anyone to sit through that unless they were like a gamer, like they've played retro games before, they're ready to sit down and be like, this has mechanical issues, right? Do you think if you were like someone like a kid, someone young, you were like, and you were trying to get them into Final Fantasy, is this where you would start? You'd start with Kingdom Hearts, but like if it wasn't Kingdom Hearts.
I don't even know that I would start with Kingdom Hearts either. Like, for me, trying to recommend these kind of games to like a newer generation of gamers is hard because those games Kingdom Hearts came out over 20 years ago. And like, think about how shitty the combat is in Kingdom Hearts.
Oh, I know. That's the point I'm trying to make is it's like, I wouldn't plague someone to sit down with Crisis Core. Like I slogged through Crisis Core and the thing that kept me going is I wanted the answers from Crisis Core. And I feel like...
So I think understanding like just the story. Well, yeah, I never played Crisis Core. Like, I was like, I need to just watch this 4-hour YouTube video with all these cutscenes because that's all that matters.
Right, yeah.
So I think if I was gonna like you're telling me to recommend a Final Fantasy game?
No, a Final Fantasy VII game, something to get them into the 7 IP specifically. So they'd be familiar with Sephiroth, Cloud, and the characters that would make them want to play these games.
I don't think it's the Crisis Core game.
No,
the Crisis Core game's
no.
combat is bad.
Hell no. That's what I'm saying. Like, what game would it be? Would it be this game? Because this game probably has the cleanest mechanics, or would it be maybe the Yuffie game, Intergrade? Like, think about it. You're trying to get one person to start playing the Final Fantasy VII IP. Where would you start them? Would you start them on Advent Children? It's actually probably wouldn't be a bad place.
See, I feel like Remake is good because it probably tells you the story up until you get to the end in a reasonable way.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like, no matter what, you're going to have a ton of questions because there is a universe built around these, right?
Right.
And so I think no matter what, you're going to be disrupted, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess if you wanted to do like self-contained Advent Children to like get the people interested in the characters, but I think that the first like bomb run set in Remake is up until kind of the boss fight. The boss fight's a little bit too long, but that whole beginning part I think gives you the best idea of that world.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I would agree with you there. And like probably even on to the next part where you're exploring under the slums and getting to know Seventh Heaven. That is a really good place to start, actually.
Well, I just think that at a certain point, it's too big to hold.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. The game is too big.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, I'm sure that they wish they could tell like the self-contained storyline as like one game and finish it beginning to end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to make an excuse for the limitations of hardware, whatever.
Right.
I just think that if you're trying to, it has to be different at this point. Like it has to be different from the original. And how do you do that? And I think ultimately somebody had to make the decision, right? Mm-hmm. And I think with we have to consider this art, right? Like we have to consider video games as art, right? And the fact that there's controversy around it and some people like it and some people hate it means that it's probably doing its job, right? Like it doesn't have to be universally lauded because even then there are people who are not going to play it, right?
Right.
Whereas I think of like, you know,
well, I would say
think of like Baldur's Gate and stuff like that.
Well, I would say this is much more esoteric than Baldur's Gate. Like this is much more of a niche thing than Baldur's Gate at this point. Like even Final Fantasy is much more niche than say something like Mass Effect or Dragon's Age, you know, that sees like a wider range of an audience play it just because it's not as, you know, it's not niche. It's not something that you had to get into as a kid through some other form of osmosis, you know?
And I think there's no clean way into the universe at this point. Like they did have the remake on the phone.
Right.
And it's like it's got better graphics. I played it for a little bit. And maybe if you're trying to introduce people that way, because it's the whole game.
Right.
Like I think maybe because it'll get you interested in the characters, but I think once you see like how the characters look in like Remake, I don't think you can go back.
No, I agree.
Because Remake even looks better than it was Ever Crisis, right?
Yeah.
Or what was the Crisis Core one called?
Ever Crisis. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, so like even compared to that one, this one looks way better.
No, I agree.
Right?
I think it's very hard to go backwards without being like I'm playing this to pay homage to it, to be like, you know, like, oh, I need to figure out the storyline, or oh, I just am getting a completionist ding.
It'd be like if let's say they, you know, I'm gonna speak it into existence when the Kingdom Hearts remake comes out, right?
Yeah.
I think trying to understand that game, like as a new player, like if they change I don't know what they would change. The story's like pretty straightforward in terms of like once you find out about the characters, you kind of understand where the storyline's going.
Right.
I think if they tried to change that, I think it would feel kind of the same way. Where it's like I'm not going to tell you to start with one, but you kind of need to understand who these characters are.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you're going through it and these are the only ones you've played, Vincent and Sid are the only characters who kind of don't have their backgrounds explained.
Which I think is
Right,
going to
like-
happen in the new one because that's important.
The new one or a DLC in between, like
yeah.
Intergrade.
Yeah. I hope they do a Vincent
'Cause-
Intergrade. I hope that. Oh, what if they did a Dirge of Cerberus Intergrade? Did you play it? Well, of course you'd play it, but like,
I mean, if it wasn't like the original Dirge Server,
what if they did though, but they improved it and they made it handle like Devil May Cry?
I mean, if you could like punch it, yeah, sure, I'd play it. But I think it'd still be restricted to the same system, which means that we're going to see how Vincent's going to play in the new system.
True. Well,
Because Yuffie feels different in that she feels a lot faster in Intergrade, from what I remember. But is it going to end up being like, how are the guns going to work? How is his melee going to work? Are they going to be separate? Is he going to feel like Dante?
well, not to get too speculative. Why don't we wrap this up? We've been talking for more than almost an hour now. We could probably keep going, to be completely honest. But you know, final thoughts from you. What do you think? Maybe like I don't want you to give it a harsh rating, but you know, maybe a recommendation. What do you think?
I think if you've played the first one, right? If you played not 7, like Remake. If you played Remake, I think that this game does a lot to grow in terms of the way the world works, in terms of the way the combat works. By comparison, Remake feels so small in comparison. And I think if you like that and you're just interested in what happens to these characters, I don't see a reason for you not to play it, especially if you're somebody who's going to only buy like 4 games a year. Like, you're going to get your money out of it. It looks great. The combat's fun. The minigames suck, but you don't have to do those. And I think you just experience it for what it is. If this is your first foray into the games, like if 7 Remake is your first drop into this, there's a lot of stuff there. And I'm going to be honest with you, not all of it's worth playing. Like, I'm going to tell you that right now. I watched Chris play Dirge of Cerberus for half an hour. And I would not go back to do that. Go to YouTube, watch the YouTube cutscenes. That's all you need to know. It'll give you the information, it'll give you the answers that you need to know and why things are different. And it's a shitty thing to have to do, but if you really care about what's happening to the characters and you're interested in the storyline, that is the way I would suggest you experience. I mean, if you want to play Ever Crisis, you can, but it wasn't for. Based on watching Chris play it, it wasn't for me.
Yep. I mean, I obviously love this game, this series, this IP, and my passion for it does represent how much I care. Like, and although I may not have liked the outcome, or I may not like what I think the outcome is going to be, I really do enjoy seeing the characters, and I like seeing them in the upgraded graphics, and like the little moments between them that we didn't get to experience the first time are nice. And I think Square Enix does do a very good job of really trying. Like, they put so much effort into this. And that's the thing, is it's like, you cannot slight them for trying, because they put so much work into these games. And
like, they had to give a shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
they gave so many shits. They literally put every single game that was in the original one and more. Like, far be it for them, they could have predicted that, you know, we didn't like the overtuned super mini games, but they really did try. And I do appreciate the love for the series. I appreciate fans of the series. And, you know, I think it's cool that it has existed for this long. It really does speak to, I think, the character dynamics, the story, and like the overarching message of Final Fantasy VII. I think it still stays to this day.
Well, you signed off every video we did.
So I guess I signed this one off too. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and we hope we can see you on the next playthrough. And here's to hoping this isn't your last save point.
Bye.
Bye.